It was exactly 7:45 p.m., and the ballroom at the Fairmont in downtown Los Angeles shimmered like a diamond, light spilled from massive chandeliers. Catching the clink of crystal glasses and the gleam of designer gowns, the city's most powerful were gathered beneath vaulted ceilings, laughing politely, moving through air that smelled of wealth, roses, and calculated ambition. At the edge of the crowd, a woman entered alone. Her name was Naoko Sato, and though most in the room didn't recognize her, a few paused mid-conversation when they saw the kimono. It was ivory silk, embroidered with gold cranes. The kind of garment that whispered tradition and power. Her hair was pulled into a smooth, lacquered bun. No makeup. No diamonds. Just a single pearl comb tucked above her ear. She didn't rush. She walked as if time were hers, passing by guests who stared too long and smiled too little. Whispers followed her like perfume. Someone near the bar said she looked like she was headed to a tea ceremony, not a gala that would decide the fate of a $200 million partnership. A hedge fund manager snickered. This is Los Angeles, not Kyoto. From the raised stage near the center, the host tapped the mic. The room hushed. The band faded, and heads turned as Naoko climbed the steps without being introduced. She nodded once to the crowd, then spoke. In Japanese. The room froze. For the first few seconds, people exchanged glances, thinking maybe she'd switch to English. She didn't. Her voice was smooth and measured, and though the meaning of her words was lost to most, her tone was impossible to ignore. Still, brows furrowed, champagne paused mid-sip. Someone muttered under their breath, if she wants to talk business, she should try speaking the language. Far across the room, by the gold-trimmed buffet tables, a server moved with practiced care. Hanamatag read Emily. She carried a silver tray of wine glasses, weaving between guests with a kind of soft invisibility that only servers mastered. Her black shoes were silent on the marble. Her white shirt was starched, but not new. Her hands were steady, but her eyes never stopped scanning. She heard Naoko's voice before she saw her. The sound caught her like a hook in the chest. She turned, just slightly, tilting her head toward the stage. Her eyes narrowed. She understood every word. The guests around her didn't. They smirked. They whispered to one another, loud enough to sting but soft enough to excuse. One woman in a silver gown leaned in and said, maybe she thinks this makes her look exotic. A man in a sharp blue suit laughed and said something about people trying too hard to seem unique. Emily didn't react. She just shifted the tray slightly in her hand. Naoko stood tall, unfazed. Though the silence around her had grown sharp, she continued speaking. Her voice didn't waver. She didn't look for validation. She didn't seem to care if anyone in the room understood her or not. Emily's steps slowed as she passed the edge of the stage. Her gaze flicked up. There was something in Naoko's posture that made her stop for just a moment. Something familiar. That silence, that resistance, that quiet knowledge that no one in the room wanted to hear what you had to say. A guest brushed past, snapping Emily back into motion. She turned away, refreshed someone's drink, nodded politely, but her ears stayed locked on the cadence of Naoko's speech. No one else noticed. No one else listened. Not really. And in that room, full of voices that only heard themselves, only Emily knew what was being said. She wasn't just carrying wine that night. She was carrying a secret, and Naoko, though she didn't know it yet, wasn't standing alone. By 8 o'clock, the air in the ballroom had shifted. Naoko was still speaking, her voice calm and deliberate. But the mood had begun to curdle. It started at table 4, where Richard Lawson, a real estate tycoon known for his arrogance and tan year-round skin, leaned back in his chair and muttered, "This isn't Tokyo." His words weren't loud, but the smirk on his face traveled farther than his voice ever could. Next to him, Diana Cross, a corporate lawyer whose heels were taller than her empathy, tilted her head as if studying a strange object. She sipped her champagne with a practiced pout and said, "Honestly, if she wants to be taken seriously, she should speak English. This is business, not performance art." A few seat down, Evelyn Hart, a hedge fund heiress draped in navy silk, gave a tight laugh. She ran a manicured finger along the rim of her wine glass and whispered to her date, "I mean, it's a gala, not a cultural exhibition. Did no one explain the dress code?" Emily heard it all as she moved through the space. Her tray had grown lighter, but her chest heavier. She dipped between conversations, offering drinks, clearing glasses, making herself small. That was part of the job. You blended in. You became background. At table 7, Victor Mendes, a venture capitalist with a voice like gravel and breath that carried, leaned toward a group of younger entrepreneurs. "I've seen this before," he said. Someone trying to make a statement. It's not brave. It's disruptive. He chuckled and adjusted his cufflinks like punctuation. Emily passed by, just in time to catch the glance. One of them shot toward the stage. He was barely 28. But his watch probably cost more than her yearly rent. He smirked and said, "She's not even trying to engage. It's rude. Honestly. Arrogant. Like we're supposed to meet her halfway." Behind them, Celeste Monroe, an art gallery owner in sequins and silver eyeliner, tapped her fork on the table as if testing for cracks. "It's not just the language," she said. "It's the attitude. She thinks she's above all of this. Maybe in Kyoto that's how it works. But here, you either play the game or you lose the deal." Emily moved past Celeste's table, offering a glass of Chardonnay to a man who barely glanced at her. She caught the eye of a woman beside him who rolled hers toward the stage. "This is embarrassing," the woman whispered, like a parody of a rich foreigner. You'd think someone that wealthy could afford a stylist. Somewhere near the dessert station, Martin Pierce, a tech executive with a laugh that grated like a ringtone, raised his glass and called out, "Anyone here got Google Translate? Maybe we can crowdsource this speech." A few chuckles followed. Someone clinked their glass like they were cheering. Emily didn't laugh. She didn't even blink, but her hands clenched a little tighter around the tray. She set down an empty glass. She adjusted a napkin. She walked slowly, letting the rhythm of Naoko's voice guide her steps, even as the room tried to drown it out. At table 9, a woman named Samantha, dripping in diamonds and disdain, leaned over and whispered to her friend. She probably thinks this makes her look cultured. It just looks desperate. She smiled, like she'd said something clever. Emily felt something coil inside her. Not rage. Not yet. Just pressure, like something being squeezed without release. She kept moving. Quiet. But her steps were more deliberate now. Her eyes sharper. The tray steadier. She paused at a corner near the edge of the dance floor, resting for a breath she didn't have time to take. From there, she could see the whole room. Dozens of faces turned toward Naoko. Not one of them really listening. Not one even trying. Naoko hadn't raised her voice once. She hadn't faltered. She hadn't switched languages. Emily watched her stand there, completely alone at the center of the noise, while the crowd sat in their confidence, convinced they knew better. Emily knew what that felt like. To speak and be ignored. To show up and be unseen. The sound of Naoko's voice wrapped around her like a memory, and something in her posture shifted. Not a decision. Not yet. Just awareness. The room saw a woman speaking nonsense. Emily heard someone speaking truth. And for the first time that night, she knew the crowd wasn't just being rude. They were being blind. At 8:20 p.m., Emily stood near the back of the room, her tray nearly empty. But she hadn't returned to the kitchen. She stayed close to the stage. Not out of obligation, but something else. Something keyed her. Naoko's voice drifted across the room in waves, calm and steady, like the tide refusing to pull back. And Emily understood every word. She hadn't spoken Japanese in years. Not out loud anyway. Not since her grandmother passed. The words had lived quietly in her memory, tucked away with old lullabies and holiday recipes. But tonight, each syllable that left Naoko's lips pulled them forward again, warm and sharp, all at once. Emily caught the rhythm, the phrasing, the emotion folded inside. Naoko spoke about legacy, about how partnerships built without understanding fall apart. She spoke of the weight women carry when they walk into rooms where their silence is expected. Her voice didn't waver, but there was something in it that made Emily's heart ache. Because it wasn't just about business. It was about being seen, and no one here was really seeing her. Emily glanced at the nearby tables. Guests were still sipping, still whispering, still missing the point. They weren't just uninterested. They were deliberately turning away. A part of her wanted to stay out of it, to finish her shift, collect her tip, and forget the whole night. It wasn't her problem, but the words kept coming. And they weren't just Naoko's anymore. They were echoes of her own life. She stepped quietly closer to the stage, careful not to draw attention. Naoko's eyes flicked in her direction for the briefest second. Emily lowered her tray. Then, barely above a breath, she spoke in Japanese. They don't understand. It's not disrespect, just ignorance. Her tone was soft, gentle, almost hesitant. Naoko stopped mid-sentence. Her gaze snapped toward Emily, like she'd just heard something impossible. For a second, the whole room faded. Just the two of them stood there. A billionaire en stage, a waitress in a black apron. And yet, something passed between them that had nothing to do with status. Emily's throat tightened. She hadn't meant to speak. Not really. The words had slipped out like muscle memory. But now Naoko was looking at her, and there was no judgment in her eyes. Only surprise. And something else. Relief. Emily turned away quickly, pretending to adjust a glass on a table nearby. Her cheeks burned. She didn't want to be noticed. But she didn't regret it either. Naoko's voice resumed behind her. Steady again. But there was a new lilt to it. A shift in tone. She wasn't entirely alone anymore. Emily's thoughts buzzed. She could walk away. She should walk away. But she couldn't unhear the things being said about Naoko. And she couldn't pretend it wasn't personal anymore. Not after watching her stand tall while being dismissed. Misread. Mocked. Not when the words she spoke meant something. Not when no one else seemed to care. She looked up and found Naoko's eyes on her again. The expression was subtle, but it held a quiet kind of invitation. Not a plea. Not a command. Just acknowledgement. Emily exhaled slowly. She wasn't brave. Not usually. She liked staying in the background. She liked being safe. But maybe, just maybe, tonight wasn't about being safe. Maybe it was about finally stepping into a moment she hadn't even realized was waiting for her. The crowd kept murmuring. Their laughter rose again. Shallow and easy. But Emily wasn't listening to them anymore. She was listening to Naoko. And for the first time all night, someone on that stage was listening back. By 8:35 p.m., the murmurs had grown into open snickering. Naoko stood at the podium, her words still flowing in Japanese, but the energy in the room had tilted from discomfort into mockery. Champagne buzzed through their blood, and entitlement made the air thick. No one tried to hide it anymore. They had stopped listening. Emily stepped forward. No one noticed at first. She set her tray down on a nearby table, wiped her palms discreetly on her apron, and walked toward the front of the room. Her steps were quiet, but with purpose. Naoko caught her eye, and the moment stretched between them like a drawn breath. Then Emily spoke. Her voice was calm, low, and clear. Mrs. Sato says that trust is built on understanding, not assumption. The room fell silent. Someone near the front turned around, confused. Another tilted their head, as if trying to place her face. "Who is she?" someone asked from the crowd. "Just a waitress." Came another voice. A dry laugh followed. Emily didn't flinch. Her eyes stayed fixed on Naoko, who gave the smallest nod. Encouragement, not instruction. Naoko continued speaking. Slower now, allowing Emily to follow. "Mrs. Sato says that dignity is not proven by blending in prostole. It's revealed by staying true to who you are." Louder this time. Laughter broke out. "That's rich." A man muttered near the bar. "What's she doing?" "Auditioning for a TED Talk." Emily ignored them. She focused only on Naoko. One sentence at a time. Steady. "Mrs. Sato says that we cannot expect harmony when we silence what we don't understand." Someone clapped. A single sarcastic beat, then stopped. "This is absurd," said a woman in a silver dress. "Are we seriously letting the help translate a billion-dollar discussion?" Emily's hands tightened briefly, but her voice didn't shake. "Mrs. Sato says that language is not what divides us. Fear is." She paused after the last word, just long enough for the silence to deepen. The air felt different now, tighter, a tension that hadn't been there before. A few guests looked away from the stage. A few others leaned in. Emily heard every breath in the room, every shifting chair, every dropped fork. But she didn't move. Naoko's words came again, gentle but firm. Emily translated, "Mrs. Sato says that arrogance makes poor soil for partnership." That one landed. A ripple moved through the front tables. Someone exhaled sharply. Maybe out of surprise, maybe guilt. "She's bluffing," said a voice from the back. Probably memorized a few lines on an app. Emily turned slightly, not to address the voice, but to stand taller. Her face stayed calm. Her tone didn't change. "Mrs. Sato says that anyone can speak. Few choose to listen." That quieted them. Emily took a breath and waited. Naoko didn't speak right away. She let the words settle first. Then she gave one final line. Emily echoed it without hesitation. "Mrs. Sato says that understanding begins where judgment ends." Silence stretched across the ballroom. No one laughed now. No one raised a glass. Naoko looked at Emily with something close to pride. Emily didn't smile. She didn't bow. She simply stood her ground. In a room full of power, money, and noise, she had become the only voice that mattered. By 8:40 p.m., the room had gone tight with stillness. The clinking and whispering had stopped, replaced by a brittle kind of silence. Emily's voice cut through it, low but sharp, every word carrying weight far beyond its volume. "Mrs. Sato says, those who mock what they don't understand are the ones who lose." A man near the center shifted in his seat. He glanced at the person beside him, waiting for a laugh that didn't come. "Mrs. Sato says, power without respect is just noise." A woman in pearls lowered her eyes. Her hand froze mid-stir in her drink. Someone at her table cleared their throat and looked away. "Mrs. Sato says, appearance means nothing when truth is ignored." The air thickened. You could feel the discomfort in the room. Shoulders tensed. Eyes darted. Not one of them had expected this. Not from her. "Mrs. Sato says, silence in the face of ignorance is not weakness. It's calculation." Emily's voice didn't rise, but it hit harder with each word. It didn't need volume. It had truth. "Mrs. Sato says, if your value depends on someone else's silence, you were never valuable to begin with." Someone exhaled sharply, a small gasp escaping before she could stop it. Another guest looked at the floor like it might offer an escape. "Mrs. Sato says, judgment is a mirror. It always turns back on the one holding it. Emily paused just long enough to let that land. Then she said the last line, the one that made the entire room still. Mrs. Sato says, if you fear a voice smaller than yours, maybe it's because it speaks louder than you ever could. No one laughed. No one moved. They had heard her now, and they couldn't unhear it. By 8:50 p.m., Naoko stepped forward from the podium, her voice still soft. But her presence had changed. The woman who had been judged and dismissed now stood with full authority. She looked directly into the crowd, then turned her gaze to Emily. In Japanese, she spoke clearly. Emily didn't hesitate. Mrs. Sato says, if you cannot respect the woman who understood me when no one else would, then you do not deserve to work with me. Gasps rippled through the tables. No one spoke, but their expressions shifted. The same people who had rolled their eyes now looked stunned. Emily translated each line without flinching, her voice steady as stone. Mrs. Sato says, partnership is built on integrity, not convenience. She says, this room has shown her more than she needed to know. She says the contract is no longer on the table. A silence followed, heavier than anything that had come before. A man near the back knocked over his glass. Another adjusted his tie, trying to hide the flush in his face. No one clapped. No one dared. Naoko gave one small nod, not to the crowd, but to Emily. Then she turned and walked down the steps. Emily moved with her. Both women quiet, calm, and fully in control. The consequences didn't wait. By 9:15 p.m., Richard Lawson's office phone had started ringing. By morning, 2 major partners had pulled out. The headline on a tech blog read, Real Estate Titan Loses, $1 billion deal over public misstep. Diana Cross's quote caught on someone's live stream circulated online before sunrise. Clients dropped her name from bios. One asked for a new lawyer by the end of the week. Evelyn Hart's fund trended on social media, but not for the right reasons. An old interview resurfaced where she spoke about diversity. The comment section turned brutal. Victor Mendez tried to laugh it off on a podcast, calling it a misunderstanding. But his firm's name was already being pulled from a nonprofit gala the following month. Quietly, politely, completely, and through it all, Emily didn't say a word. She went home that night, tucked her uniform away, and sat by her window with a cup of tea. Her phone buzzed with messages from coworkers. Someone had recorded her standing on that stage. The video was everywhere. But Emily didn't look for approval. She wasn't chasing credit. She had done what needed to be done. Naoko, meanwhile, returned to her hotel with the weight of a $1 billion decision lifted off her shoulders. She had come seeking partnership. Instead, she found clarity. 2 women, one overlooked, one underestimated, both seen at last. The fallout would take days, maybe weeks, but the shift had already happened, not just in headlines or boardrooms, but in that room. At that moment, the crowd hadn't just lost a contract. They had been exposed, and there was no going back. Justice hadn't come loudly. It had come with grace, and it had come through someone they never saw coming. By 9:25 p.m., the doors to the ballroom opened behind them with a soft thud. Naoko and Emily stepped into the Los Angeles night, where the air felt cooler, cleaner. Streetlights cast long shadows along the sidewalk. The sky above them was dark, but not empty. Naoko walked slowly, the hem of her kimono brushing the concrete like silk over stone. Emily matched her pace, still in her uniform, still quiet. People from the gala lingered near the entrance. Some watched them walk. This time, they didn't see a waitress. Emily didn't look back. She didn't need to. Whatever those people saw in her now, it didn't change who she was before. And it didn't matter now. She knew what she had done. That was enough. Naoko stopped at the curb, then turned just slightly toward Emily. No words were exchanged. Just a shared moment. The kind that doesn't need to be explained, the kind that says, "You saw me, and I saw you." Emily let herself breathe. Not the shallow kind she was used to, a full breath, the kind you only take when something heavy has finally lifted. Later, people would tell stories about that night. About the billionaire who walked away. About the server who spoke like she had been waiting her whole life for the chance. And maybe they'd get it wrong. Maybe they'd forget the quiet. But Emily would remember. So would Naoko. And maybe you felt that too. Like no one saw you. Like you had to shrink to fit into places that were never built for you in the first place. But you don't have to prove your worth to people who refuse to see it. You don't have to speak louder to be heard. You just have to keep standing. Keep showing up. Keep being who you are. Even when the room doesn't clap. You were always enough. You still are. And the world, sooner or later, always notices what it tried so hard to ignore.